Here to help us dive into the current state of the U.S.-Israeli relationship is reporter from the Daily Caller, William Davis. William, thank you once again for joining us tonight. This topic, I just want to start off really asking you first, how is the Trump administration's relationship with Israel? Is it as close as the two leaders say?
Well, I don't think there's ever been an administration in the history of the United States that's closer with Israel than the Trump administration, no doubt.
And acknowledging the fact there's a number of things we could point to. We could point to military assistance. That's always been there. The most obvious one is moving the U.S. embassy to Israel. But that's a decision, or excuse me, to Jerusalem. But that's a decision that did get a lot of backlash, especially from the United Nations. Why is the United Nations so adversarial to Israel when they allow other countries such as Venezuela, China, whoever it may be, to get away with human rights violations?
That's a good question, and I think one that people have been trying to figure out. I mean, I think we can figure out at least part of the reason, but I think that the United Nations, they, as you pointed out, they do have a lot of. Ironically, they have a lot of anti-human rights countries on their Human Rights Council, and so I think there's a lot of Islamic countries in there that don't like Israel, and there's a lot of communist countries that don't like Israel. Or that are just like anti-Semitic in general. So I think that's part of the reason why the UN is so anti-Israel.
But I do want to pivot this back to home here in the U.S. too, because we're at a time where there seems to be a divide when it comes to support amongst Israel. I mean, it wasn't too long ago where Bernie Sanders said that Israel has to change its actions if it wants to continue getting that aid. It actually kind of sounds like a quid pro quo when I say it out loud. But acknowledging that fact too, there is a divide about how to go about Israel. Obviously, the Trump administration has been very clear on its stance, but the Democrats have taken a little bit more of a more combative stance where they're saying that we demand differences from Israel. Is that something that's going to be on the ballot in 2020? Do you think that'll be a big campaign issue, or do you think that's something a little more niche that people don't think about?
I do think it'll be a big campaign issue, Alex. I mean, I think it's a pretty big deal that for the first time in probably since 1948, when the international community recognized Israel shortly after World War II, that Israel is now become a partisan issue in the United States. If support for Israel is your top issue or top priority of yours, you're really sort of left to vote for Republicans. I mean, Democrats, it's not, safe to assume that the next Democratic president is going to be pro-Israel. There's a very anti-Israel strand of their base. There's a lot of anti-Israel members of Congress, that just support a boycott of Israel and sanctions against them. So I do think support for Israel is definitely something that will be on the ballot next November. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and President Trump has actually been kind of trying to frame the 2020 election using some of those Congress members that you were talking about. Rashida Tlaib has come out saying, essentially making up history regarding the Holocaust, saying Palestinians were welcoming them. They're kind of fabricating history in that regard. Of course, Ilhan Omar has her own anti-Semitic allegations as well. She has her resolution that was brought to the House floor. It didn't name her specifically, but I mean, that's really what it was stemming from. But also, the Israeli government right now has a little bit of uncertainty as well. The Netanyahu government was unable to kind of form their coalition governments twice now, and really it's up for grabs there in Israel. So what does that kind of mean for the U.S.? Is Israel just as dependent on the U.S. as the U.S. is on Israel?
But as far as you're right. Israel does have a little bit of a tenuous domestic political situation now. So, but no matter how that gets resolved, I don't think you'll see huge policy changes politically within Israel or in terms of their foreign policy.